Offered by Commissioner Brady, followed by the Pledge of Allegiance.
Heavenly Father, enable us to draw upon the wisdom and experience of yesterday as we respond to the questions and concerns of tomorrow. Give us freedom to speak the truth boldly and with kindness. Give us patience to listen openly without prejudice. Give us confidence to discover and explore new possibilities. And give us wisdom to discern what is right and good and just. In your name we pray. Amen.
Amen. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Mrs. Cresser, would you call the roll, please?
Ms. Lloyd? Here. Mr. Poole?
Here.
Mr. Waddington? Here. Mr. Murray? Here. Mr. Brady?
Here.
Ms. Horn? Here.
Commissioners, you have before you the minutes of our meeting of October 22nd, 2018. What is your pleasure?
Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Waddington.
I move that we accept the minutes of the October 22nd meeting and dispense with formal reading.
Second.
There's been a motion and second. Discussion? Without objection, the motion be approved. And hearing no objection, the motion is approved. Turn to audience participation, but before we do that, I do want to note that this is about the longest break I remember between commission meetings. We once a quarter we have a period where we kind of catch up because we meet twice a month, and we get an extra week in there now and again. And then this didn't fall on a Monday; it fell on a Tuesday. And in the 3 weeks in between, Mr. Waddington, I tried a week-long trial in Columbus. Got to see all 3 of my daughters in Southwest Ohio, and my son was sworn in as an attorney this morning in Columbus. I should probably say that I missed you, but I don't. But
I'll call you at 4 in the morning.
It's good to be here. I was in suffering withdrawal. But audience participation, please. Anyone wishing to address the commission on any commission regular agenda items, please step up to the microphone, give us your name and address, and share with us your thoughts.
Thank you, Mr. President, City Commission, City staff. Tim Schwanger, 362 Sheffield Way. I have many items that I wanted to discuss tonight, but I only have 3 minutes, so I'm going to discuss a little bit about item number 5, which is the $50,000 from the EMS fund for the demolition costs associated with 407 West Jefferson Street. The actual heading for this ordinance is for 407 West Jefferson Street, which is a property that is not condemned, is not in the city's land bank, is not in the county's land bank, and is a functional property. There's actually a business in there right now, I believe. But when you get into the supporting documents, there's some confusion there, and it looks like there's some wording there that this money, this $50,000, may go to the demolition of 2 properties that are actually in the Erie County Land Bank, and I don't understand the confusion. It's almost like we have 2 different ordinances there going on there for some reason. And the question I have is that I was always told that if properties were in the Erie County Land Bank program, that it was Erie County's responsibility for demolition of those properties, which means that there should not be any city involvement. So when you get to that item number 5, maybe we can get a little bit better explanation as to what we're actually doing here. Like I said, the ordinance says 407, but then when you get into supporting documents, it mentions a couple other properties, and that's kind of confusing the public. There's been a lot of public discussion in the last week since the agenda came out, and I don't know if any of you guys are on actually the board of trustees for the Catholic schools, the Catholic, sports, whatever it is, or if your businesses are sponsors or supporters of the Catholic Boosters Club. But I would think that, and again, I don't work for the Attorney General or the Secretary of State, but be careful when you vote on this. If you have any ties to that, you might want to be careful on how you vote. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Carter. I'm sure Mr. Lasko is going to address all of those questions in detail. Anyone else wishing to address the commission on any of our agenda items? If not, then we are very fortunate to have the Whiteman Weaver Foundation here tonight to make a formal presentation. Mr. Kidwell, the floor is yours. I understand you're leading this off.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Murray and Commissioners. Appreciate your inviting us to participate tonight. I am the chairperson of the Whiteman Weber Foundation. That's the Michelle Whiteman, Carrie Weber Charitable Foundation. With me today are some members of our Board of Trustees, and I would like to introduce them and ask them if they wouldn't come and join me here as we go forward tonight. Would you, trustees, come on up. We are a foundation that consists of 9 trustees. There are 3 trustees that are legacy seats on our foundation. Those legacy seats belong to our founder, our 2 founders. First of all, Darlene Lowry is our founder. Arlene Whiteman Lowry, along with Jennifer Weber Chapman, and our 3rd legacy seat belongs to Ann Murray. In addition to those 3 legacy seats, we have designees that are not here tonight. One is Darlene's daughter, Tricia Patton. Another is and although Ann isn't here, it's Ann's designee, her son Jimmy Murray, and then our at-large members are, besides me, are Kevin Lutz and Justin Harris and Rhonda Watt, who happens to be enjoying Puerto Rico at this time. So last Thursday, we had the honor and the privilege of having a news conference. And by the way, for that news conference, thank you, Kelly, and thank you, Mackenzie, and thank you, Leslie and Eric, for the guidance on that. We had the privilege of making a presentation from our foundation to the city for the Sandusky Bay Pathways project. Now, to put that into perspective, we need to understand that the Whiteman Weber Foundation actually began, or the journey that brought us to where we are today, began in February of 1989 when Michelle Whiteman and Carrie Weber were killed in a collision with the train at the Remington Avenue crossing. That was a very sad note. We turned that in, the parents turned that into something that could benefit us all in March of 1996 when we incorporated as the Whiteman Weber Foundation, the Michelle Whiteman Carrie Weber Charitable Foundation. We actually came into, we actually got to the point where we could make a distribution in January of 2000. That was our first time to distribute funds to a nonprofit organization in the city of Sandusky. Since then, up through today, we have distributed almost $5 million to nonprofit organizations within Erie County. Now, as you know, working with foundations, that as a private foundation, we are required to distribute 5% of our value a year. And we have done that, and we have staunchly stayed at 5% a year until last Thursday. Last Thursday evening, as a result of our meeting early in October, we have decided to break into the principal value of our foundation to grant the city $500,000 for the Sandusky Bay Pathways project. That is actually the results of a almost 2-year conversation within our board. as we discussed it thoroughly time and time again, and then saw it gain traction with the Jackson Street Pier Development Project and other things along our Bay corridor, and we just are so pleased and actually take great honor in being able to be a part of that Sandusky Bay Pathway Project by presenting to the city this grant. So with that being said, last week was a press release. Today is a formal commitment of the Whiteman Weber Foundation to, in January, begin with the distribution of that $500,000 for the Sandusky Bay Pathway Project. Thank you. And with that, if you don't mind, we will let you get back to
Well, thank you so much, all of you, for being here, and I'm really quite relieved to see that Justin Harris is on the board. I was afraid he just came to look for his job back. So is Trevor.
No, he's not.
anything else, Eric?
No, I think do you want to make a motion?
I'd like to say again, as last week, thank you. This is a great, as I said last week, a blessing for our community going forward. This will last for decades and years and years to come. Far when we're all gone, it'll be name recognition. I love working with all you guys. It's been, what, 15 years now, so I enjoy it all. I'm going to let Mr. Brady, who I had sneak over to Maritime to stop in the week and a half ago.
Mr. Chairman, I didn't know that when I stopped in to do a personal thank you that I was spilling the beans. I understand that some of the people there had not realized that they'd formally committed those dollars, so I apologize for that. But the reason I stopped is because, as most of you know, I couldn't be with you on Thursday for the presentation of the foundation. But I'll reiterate what I said that day, and it's kind of I think it's. I'm going to repeat something that Mr. Kidwell said. This family has taken a personal, horrific tragedy and turned it into a legacy benefit that will outlast all of us sitting here. This is something that will live on for 100 years, this donation. That's meaningful to all of us, and thank you for it.
Thank you. You may stay as long as you wish, but you are required. Mr. Harris knows exactly where the getting's good.
Just now?
You have to stay. And next, in the running for one of the Beard awards of some type is Greg Volz, Assistant City Planner, and he is here to make to start off a public hearing regarding a proposed vacation of a portion of Farwell Street and the vacation of a 10-foot alley that's presently unused. Ms. Volz.
Thank you, Commission President. This is, as mentioned, a public hearing for sites that Cedar Fair has submitted petitions for the vacation of a portion of Farwell Street and a portion of a 10-foot alley located at 1800 Cleveland Road, which you can see outlined in red on the screen above. Cedar Fair is the only adjacent property owner and looks to vacate these these right-of-ways to create a more developable site. No properties will be landlocked, and due to this request, engineering has reviewed and will work to maintain an easement for a sewer line that it runs on Farwell Street. If there are further questions,
Commissioners, any questions regarding this piece of regarding this hearing, which also shows up as an agenda item number 7 later on tonight? This is a public hearing. If there's anyone wishes to speak to this issue, please step to the microphone, and as usual, give us your name and address. Share with us your thoughts.
Yeah, Tim Schwanger, 362 Sheffield Way. I just have a question, not a concern. Has there been a history done on this particular item? Has Cedar Point tried to come to the city before to vacate this? Has any history work been done on this to see what's happened in the past, and if it's been turned down in the past, why it's been turned down in the past? Thank you.
I am unaware of that. Mr. Volz, can you address that?
To our knowledge, that has not occurred in the past.
Yeah, I think as Mr. Poole is pointing out, they just recently acquired the property.
They didn't own the property.
Yeah, okay. All right, anything further? Then this hearing is closed, and I wonder if someone might care to make a motion to accept all of our communications from staff recommending various pieces of legislation. There's a motion. Is there a second?
Second.
Then a motion and second discussion. Without objection, the motion will be approved, and hearing no objection, the motion is approved. First, Commissioners, with respect to the consent agenda items, are there any items there that any of you wish to have placed on the regular agenda? If not, then, Mrs. Cresser, would you present the consent agenda items, please?
Yes, Mr. President. Item A is authorization to dispose of computers and computer equipment. This is the second reading. Item B is also a second reading for the annual discharge fee payment to the Ohio EPA for the wastewater treatment plant. Item C is payment to Erie County for the annual 911 equipment replacement and maintenance. Item D, 8 separate chemical contracts for Big Island Water Works and the wastewater treatment plant for calendar year 2019. Item E is payment to Arthur J. Gallagher and Company for the 2018-2019 property, casualty, and liability insurance. Item F is an agreement with the Erie County Board of Developmental Disabilities for transportation services with the Sandusky Transit System for calendar year 2019. Item G is a purchase agreement for property located at 1524 Forest Drive. Item H is a sale agreement with Erie County Land Reutilization Corporation for property located at 1524 Forest Drive. Item I is authorization to submit a grant application to the Ohio Department of Natural Resources for navigational aids. Item J is a change order, the first and final, for the 2018 tree and stump removal project. And item K is notification to the Ohio Division of Liquor Control regarding a new D5J liquor permit.
Thank you, Mr. Cresser. Commissioners, having heard the agenda items, how do you wish to proceed?
Mr. Chairman,
Ms. Lloyd.
I'd like to make a motion that we accept the consent agenda and declaring that all ordinances and/or resolutions A through K as drafted and presented to the City Commission under the consent agenda shall take effect in accordance with section reflected in the ordinances and/or resolutions A through K, whether it be in accordance with section 13 or 14 of the city charter.
Second.
And a motion and second discussion. My only regret is that we don't, I get to hear Mrs. Cresser pronounce sodium permanganate, and then there's that, can never pronounce that hydrofluoric acid or whatever that is. But, any other comments, germane or not? Mr. Cresser, would you poll the commissioners on the motion, please?
Ms. Lloyd?
Yes.
Mr. Poole?
Yes.
Mr. Waddington?
Yes.
Mr. Murray?
Yes.
Mr. Lockhart?
Yes.
Mr. Brady?
Yes.
Ms. Twine?
Yes.
And now on the ordinances, please.
Ms. Lloyd?
Yes.
Mr. Poole?
Yes.
Mr. Waddington?
Yes.
Mr. Murray?
Yes.
Mr. Lockhart?
Yes.
Mr. Brady?
Yes.
Ms. Twine?
Yes.
Those items are adopted. Would you present item number 1, please?
Yes, item number 1 is the second reading of an ordinance authorizing a cooperative agreement between the City of Sandusky and the Ohio Water Development Authority to finance the cost of planning, design, and construction for the Jackson Street Pier Rehabilitation Project.
Commissioners, having heard this communication, how do you wish to proceed?
Mr. Chairman,
Ms. Twine.
I move the adoption of this ordinance under the second reading.
Second.
Then a motion and second discussion. Mrs. Cresser, would you poll the commissioners on the ordinance, please?
Ms. Lloyd?
Abstain.
Mr. Poole?
No.
Mr. Waddington?
Yes.
Mr. Murray?
Yes.
Mr. Lockhart?
No.
Mr. Brady?
Yes.
Ms. Twine?
Yes.
That passes on second reading. Would you present item number 2, please?
Item number 2 is an ordinance, it's also a second reading, authorizing a cooperative agreement between the City of Sandusky and the Ohio Water Development Authority to finance the cost of planning, design, and construction for the Shoreline Drive Rehabilitation Project.
Commissioners, having heard this communication, how do you wish to proceed?
Mr. Chairman,
Mr. Waddington.
move that this ordinance be passed at second reading.
Second.
Been a motion and second. Discussion. Mrs. Cresser, would you poll the commission on the ordinance, please?
Ms. Lloyd?
Abstain.
Mr. Poole?
No.
Mr. Waddington?
Yes.
Mr. Murray?
Abstain.
Mr. Lockhart?
No.
Mr. Brady?
Yes.
Ms. Twine?
Yes.
That motion fails. Item number 3, please.
Item 3 is the second reading of an ordinance approving and adopting the Public Art and Placemaking Master Plan for the City of Sandusky.
Commissioners, having heard this communication, how do you wish to proceed?
Mr. Chairman,
Ms. Twine.
I move for the adoption of this ordinance under the second reading.
Second.
Been a motion and second. Discussion. I would note that the attachment to the legislation that outlines the particulars has been adopted or modified to address a concern raised at the last meeting regarding the composition of the Artist Selection Committee, to leave that entirely within the hands of the Arts Commission. Further discussion? If not, then Mrs. Cresser, would you poll the commissioners on the ordinance, please?
Ms. Lloyd?
Yes.
Mr. Poole?
Yes.
Mr. Waddington?
Yes.
Mr. Murray?
Yes.
Mr. Lockhart?
Yes.
Mr. Brady?
Yes.
Ms. Twine?
Yes.
That ordinance is adopted. Item number 4, please.
Item number 4 is an ordinance authorizing and directing the city manager to enter into a grant agreement with the Michelle Whiteman Carrie Weber Charitable Foundation relating to the Shoreline Drive portion of the Sandusky Bay Pathway, and declaring that this ordinance shall take immediate effect in accordance with Section 14 of the city charter.
Commissioners, having heard this communication, how do you wish to proceed?
Mr. Chairman,
Waddington.
I move for the adoption of this ordinance under suspension of rules in full accordance with section 14 of the charter.
Second.
Been a motion and second. Discussion. I will
Mr.
be.
Chairman,
Mr. Poole.
just one. This naming is as long as the path exists, right? This doesn't change like it does at the sports arenas in Cleveland every time somebody comes up with a new. This is forever.
Mr.
Through the
Wobser.
commission president to Commissioner Poole, one of the things that we have to work out are the final details of that. Certainly, we could name it in perpetuity, but we haven't gotten into that level of discussion as to exactly how the naming rights will be memorialized. But if it's the will of the commission to name it that in perpetuity, certainly that is not something that staff is opposed to.
As long as the Whiteman Weaver Foundation knows what they're. That's fine.
Will there, Mr. Poole or Mr. Wobser, will there be a particular document that will govern that? Is that the
Through the
understanding?
commission president to the commissioner, my understanding is that we intend to enter into an MOU at some point during the next several months, and we, of course, would bring that MOU back for approval of the commission, whether by legislation or motion.
Okay, all right, thank you. I will be abstaining because this is the portion of the pathway that goes right in front of my office, so I will not be voting on that. Further discussion? Mrs. Cresser, would you poll the commissioners on the motion, please?
Ms. Lloyd?
Abstain.
Mr. Poole?
Yes.
Mr. Waddington?
Yes.
Mr. Murray?
Abstain.
Mr. Lockhart?
Yes.
Mr. Brady?
Yes.
Ms. Twine?
Yes.
And now on the ordinance?
Ms. Lloyd?
Abstain.
Mr. Poole?
Yes.
Mr. Waddington?
Yes.
Mr. Murray?
Yes.
Mr. Lockhart?
Yes.
Mr. Brady?
Yes.
Ms. Twine?
Yes.
That ordinance is adopted. Item number 5, please.
Dennis? Oh,
You
abstain.
voted yes, but I assume you want the record to reflect you abstained.
Oh, pardon me, thank you. I meant to abstain, thank you.
Item
Got it
number
right the first time. Sorry.
Item number 5 is an ordinance authorizing and directing the city manager to expend funds for the acquisition of 407 West Jefferson Street by Central Catholic Athletic Boosters Incorporated, with the intention of providing assistance for the demolition of 428 and 432 Decatur Street for the purpose of blight elimination efforts within the city, and declaring that this ordinance shall take immediate effect in accordance with Section 14 of the city charter.
Commissioners, having heard this communication, how do you wish to proceed?
Mr. Chairman,
Ms. Twine.
I move for the adoption of this ordinance under the suspension of the rules in full accordance with Section 14 of the city charter.
Second.
Been a motion and second. Discussion. Lasco, there were a number of questions that were presented earlier on. Perhaps you could address those in giving the commission and the public an overview in terms of what brought us here and the details of this rather complicated agreement.
Yes, Mr. President, members of the commission, and certainly Mr. Schwanger is correct. There's a lot of moving pieces on what's being considered. I know some of this is in my communication, but this dates back most recently to 2015 when the county land bank was able to acquire these two properties. That alone was a challenge, which involves several lien releases from the county and certain lending institutions. However, since then, the county, through the Ohio Housing Finance Agency, has been attempting to demolish these two condemned commercial structures. Unfortunately, they've been embroiled in several years-long litigation, which is now sitting in the appellate court in Toledo from the property owner at 407 Jefferson, who has been requesting a restraining order on the demolition due to what they stated was structurally walls that are structurally connected to one another between 432 Decatur and 407 West Jefferson. Through that process, and several structural engineers, both from the county and the property owner of 407 West Jefferson, it was determined, in fact, that these properties are interconnected from a structural standpoint. So through that process, what is being considered is sort of a larger project than originally anticipated, which would involve the acquisition of 407 West Jefferson by the Central Catholic Athletic Boosters. The two commercial properties would remain in the hands of the county land bank. The county land bank does, in fact, to Mr. Schwanger's question, have funds for the demolition of the two Decatur Street properties. It does not cover the entire cost of the demolition. OFA puts a $25,000 cap per property that they will reimburse the county land bank. The cost of demolition for those two brick structures is over $50,000. The proposed purchase price for 407 West Jefferson is $275,000, of which $225,000 has been raised privately through the boosters over the last couple weeks. So we are proposing for commission consideration a commitment from the EMS fund of $50,000 to complete the gap for acquisition of 407 West Jefferson and for the ultimate demolition of all three commercial structures, 428, 432 Decatur, and 407 West Jefferson. As stated in the communication, these funds will only be dispersed if the transaction goes through. They will sit in an escrow account until which point the transaction for the purchase of the property is complete. If that does not happen, those funds will be dispersed back to the city. So that is, again, what's being proposed. This is, again, I think we all know this is many, many years in the making. Through tough negotiation of the boosters, the county land bank, and through the appellate court process, we believe we're coming close to a ending of this dilemma at that site.
Thank you, Mr. Lasco. Commissioners, questions or comments? Mr. Lasco, I've noticed that the sidewalk has been closed now for many years, and although this is a very different kind of approach, I think that you've been particularly adept at finding innovative solutions to unusual problems. What you described as a property that's in condemnation, but it's up in the Court of Appeals, it's tied up. It's a property that we might very well face the full cost of destroying, taking down, or the land bank would, one way or another. And I think for the $50,000 that we would be contributing to this process, it makes sense in the larger context of what you've explained. Otherwise, I don't think that I would support it, but it is one more structure that is directly causing a risk to the public because we've had to have pieces falling off. The sidewalks have been closed for a long time, so I think it makes sense as you've explained it. I think that having the Booster Club, which I don't have anything to do with, or anything else over there, may raise that much money toward the demolition and the acquisition speaks volumes to their level of commitment and participation. So I think to be good partners and clean up a blight in the city, it makes sense.
Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Poole.
From my perspective, that we have many places in this community that we can tear down buildings. And what order we do them in is somewhat just up to our decision. At this particular property is currently a significant, at $275,000, is a tax-producing property that I'm not in a rush, definitely not prepared to spend $50,000 of our money, and if the boosters at St. Mary's have $225,000 to build green space across from the school, I would rather partner with them for, say, perhaps working on improving the tennis courts, something of that nature. This particular concept of taking money off the tax rolls doesn't make sense. When we were taking down buildings that were dilapidated and they weren't paying taxes, that was fine. This, as was an earlier purchase we just made this evening, is taking something that the taxes are paid, and in this case, a $275,000 piece of property pays a lot of taxes. And we don't gain that much that if you take down 428, whatever the one building is, and leave the other one until the future, and you find out that the circumstances change and we figure out how to take it down, like they finished with court, that would be fine. But it makes no sense for us to start down a path where we begin taking properties off the tax roll. It just isn't, that doesn't work for me, so I can't support this for that reason. We have other options.
Additional questions or comments?
Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Brady.
Mr. Lasko, is it appropriate to characterize the two benefits of accomplishing this are both elimination of blight and an increase in safety, both in front of those buildings that could fall down and in the neighborhood? Would that be an accurate characterization of what we would accomplish here?
Yes, through you, Mr. President, to Commissioner Brady, I think without question, I know in my 4 years here, we've had those barricades up, and I'm sure they've been there prior to that. We also do have issues that are getting worse on 432. As anyone knows that site, the property at 432 is actually a 3-story building that towers over at least a floor and a half of 407 West Jefferson. We're starting to see leaning of the parapet wall of 432 Jefferson, which is leaning directly over the apartments at 407 West Jefferson. So there's significant issues that could grow worse as this progresses. We haven't fortunately had a collapse of that wall yet, but that is something that could always happen in the future. Again, I understand that green space may not be the highest and best productive use of that site, but certainly blight elimination is something that's attracting from real estate values in and around that site, more so than just the property in particular that would be demolished.
Additional questions or comments? Mrs. Crusher, would you poll the commissioners on the motion, please?
Ms. Lloyd? Yes. Mr. Poole?
No.
Mr. Waddington?
Yes.
Mr. Murray?
Yes.
Mr. Lockhart?
No.
Mr. Brady?
Yes.
Ms. Twine?
Yes.
And now on the ordinance?
Ms. Lloyd?
Yes.
Mr. Poole?
No.
Mr. Waddington?
Yes.
Mr. Murray?
Yes.
Mr. Lockhart?
No.
Mr. Brady?
Yes.
Ms. Twine?
Yes.
That ordinance is adopted.
Mr. Chairman,
Mr. Poole.
one last word. Also, I object to using EMS funds for this. I forgot to mention that, so please include that. If we have money for demolition, we should use that money. I think this was EMS funds, was it not?
That's correct.
Yeah, we will need fire trucks sooner than we need a park.
I disagree with that.
I know.
mean, we will need fire trucks, but we are amply funded for the equipment that we need. And that we went through a process years ago of taking a look at what the excess funds were and made a conclusion that in the interest of public safety, it did make sense to use some of these dollars to be able to take down some of these buildings that do pose a public safety threat. And I think this building has done exactly that for 4 years and appears to be on its way to potentially doing more. So with respect.
That's always.
I disagree.
Always.
Very good. Thank you. Item number 6, please.
Item 6 is an ordinance approving the new fee schedule as recommended by the Cemetery Board for the Oakland Cemetery and Memorial Park Rules and Regulations, and declaring that this ordinance shall take immediate effect in accordance with Section 14 of the City Charter.
Commissioners, having heard this communication, how do you wish to proceed? Mr. Waddington.
I move for the adoption of this ordinance under suspension of rules in accordance with Section 14 of the City Charter.
Second.
Been a motion and second. Discussion. Mrs. Cresser, would you poll the commissioners on the motion, please?
Ms. Lloyd?
Yes.
Mr. Poole?
Yes.
Mr. Waddington?
Yes.
Mr. Murray?
Abstain.
Mr. Lockhart?
Yes.
Mr. Brady?
Yes.
Ms. Twine?
Yes.
Now on the ordinance?
Ms. Lloyd?
Yes.
Mr. Poole?
Yes.
Mr. Waddington?
Yes.
Mr. Murray?
Yes. Abstain, I'm sorry.
Mr. Lockhart?
Yes.
Mr. Brady?
Yes.
Ms. Twine?
Yes.
That ordinance is adopted. Just to explain, I abstained because I forgot that my father was on the cemetery board, and I saw him in the minutes, so I don't know if I'm allowed to vote. I forgot to check with Trevor, but just as an abundance of caution, I abstained. So I'll follow up with you later on to see if, in the future, I can vote on those. Thank you. Item number 7, Mrs. Cresser.
Yes. Item 7 is an ordinance vacating a portion of Farwell Street south of Cleveland Road and north of Cleveland Avenue and located east of lots 854 to 858 and 860 and west of lots 860 to 867 and vacating a portion of an alley south of Cleveland Road located east of 1706 Cleveland Road and west of lots 854 and 855 within the city as set forth on the vacation plats, copies of which are marked as Exhibits A2 and B2 attached to this ordinance and incorporated herein, and declaring that this ordinance shall take effect under suspension of the rules as contained in and in accordance with Section 13 of the City Charter.
Commissioners, having heard this communication, how do you wish to proceed?
Mr. Chairman,
Ms. Lloyd.
I move for the adoption of this ordinance under the suspension of the rules and in full accordance with Section 13 of the City Charter.
Second.
Been a motion and second. Discussion. Mrs. Cresser, would you poll the commissioners on the motion, please?
Ms. Lloyd?
Yes.
Mr. Poole?
Yes.
Mr. Waddington?
Yes.
Mr. Murray?
Yes.
Mr. Lockhart?
Yes.
Mr. Brady?
Yes.
Ms. Twine?
Yes.
And now on the ordinance?
Ms. Lloyd?
Yes.
Mr. Poole?
Yes.
Mr. Waddington?
Yes.
Mr. Murray?
Yes.
Mr. Lockhart?
Yes.
Mr. Brady?
Yes.
Ms. Twine?
Yes.
That ordinance is adopted. Item number 8, please.
Item 8 is an ordinance passed or authorizing and directing the city manager to enter into a contract with Penrum Electric Incorporated of Wadsworth, Ohio for the Columbus-Scott-Campbell intersection project, Phase 3, and declaring that this ordinance shall take immediate effect in accordance with Section 14 of the city charter.
Commissioners, having heard this communication, how do you wish to proceed?
Mr. Chairman,
Ms.
I
Twine.
move for the adoption of this ordinance under the suspension of the rules in full accordance with Section 14 of the City Charter.
Been a motion and second. Discussion.
Mr. Chairman,
Mr. Brady.
I'd ask Mr. Klein to give us a brief description of this what I believe to be the last piece of the puzzle on Campbell Street.
Mr. Klein.
Sir, through Mr. President, to Commissioner Brady and the rest of the commissioners, as everybody's aware, we did the Campbell Street reconstruction project, including some sewer and water improvements. And as the last phase of that project, we wanted to look at doing the pedestrian improvements at the intersection of Columbus, Scott, and Campbell. So that's when we went out and got the ODOT Active Transportation Grant for that intersection. We installed quite a bit of the infrastructure on the first 2 phases of the project, and now we're looking to implement that last phase to have it completed by the spring. Those poles, the steel poles that would be erected out there are, there's a relatively long time frame on those, so as everybody can tell, we definitely calmed with the turning radii at several of those locations, so now we're looking to finalize that and make it safe for the pedestrians throughout that intersection.
Thank you, Mr. Klein. Questions or comments, commissioners? Mrs. Cresser, would you poll the commissioners on the motion, please?
Ms. Lloyd?
Yes.
Mr. Poole?
Yes.
Mr. Waddington?
Yes.
Mr. Murray?
Yes.
Mr. Lockhart?
Yes.
Mr. Brady?
Yes.
Ms. Twine?
Yes.
And now on the ordinance?
Ms. Lloyd?
Yes.
Mr. Poole?
Yes.
Mr. Waddington? Mr. Murray?
Yes.
Mr. Lockhart?
Yes.
Mr. Brady?
Yes.
Ms. Twine?
Yes.
That ordinance is adopted. Item number 9, please.
Item 9 is a resolution declaring the necessity for the city to proceed with the proposed Cedar Point Chaussee Water Tower demolition project, approving the specifications and engineer's estimate of cost thereof, and directing the city manager to advertise for and receive bids in relation thereto, and declaring that this resolution shall take immediate effect in accordance with Section 14 of the city charter.
Commissioners, having heard this communication, how do you wish to proceed?
Mr. Chairman,
Mr. Waddington.
I move for the adoption of this resolution under suspension of the rules in full accordance with Section 14 of the City Charter.
Second.
Then a motion and second. Discussion. Ms. Klein, do you want to give us an overview here, please?
Sir, Mr. President, this project is the demolition of that water tower that's been put out of service for about 5 or 6 years now. We are looking to do the full demolition, remove the foundation, and turn the site back into a grass field. I don't know exactly what happens to that site after the fact. I know we've had discussions with the property owner in that area, and we'll follow up with him further through the law department as well. But that tower has not been used. The origin of that tower was for Cedar Point use solely back in the day. It got turned over to the city of Sandusky, and with the pressure district and the connection over at the east end of the chaussee, it's no longer needed. So we've gone through the EPA permitting and gone through that entire process, and we're looking to just take it down for safety purposes mostly.
Okay. Commissioners, questions or comments? Thank you, Mr. Klein. Mr. Hayberger, I was troubled by one thing I read, and I'm sorry I've been out of town. I didn't get a chance to follow up on this, but as I understand it, given the nature of the easement that we have, if we completely withdraw from that site, then the property reverts to the adjacent landowner. I would rather not completely withdraw from the use of that property, and I would rather keep a beachhead there, if you'll excuse the pun. Because I could see that there might be a need for that property. That property is quite expensive, and it'd be difficult to acquire if we needed it in the future for, let's say, a replacement primary intake or something like that. I'm not sure that I want to think that completely withdrawing from that is a great idea. Can you comment on that a little bit, or how I haven't seen the underlying documents. You're the city's attorney, I'm not. I just would like a little feedback on that. I'm sorry I'm doing it here. I should have called in advance.
Through you, Commissioner President. My understanding is exactly what you just stated, that if we completely take down the water tower and basically stop using that area, we lose our easement. So if we don't want to lose the easement, we would have to do something like you're saying.
Mr. Chairman?
Mr. Lockhart.
I understand, from my recollection of the same thing, let me say I support your idea first of retaining the property, but from my recollection, we would have to maintain a use along retaining the property in order to keep that easement. So we would actually have to have, I believe, some type of functional use there along with retaining the property.
Mr. Chairman?
And the law director, I think, you saying correct?
Through you, Commissioner President, Mr. Lockhart, yes, I would agree with that.
Okay. Mr. Poole.
I also agree with you, Mr. Chairman. May I suggest, I would prefer that we either table this or vote it down and start over, rather than pass this and then get involved and find out that we've done something that puts us in a bad position.
I'm inclined in that direction. I'd want to hear from Mr. Klein what that might do. Where are we at? We are, you're just sending out bids, so there's really no rush. This wouldn't be done until the spring anyway. So if we take 2 weeks to think about this a little bit more, would that cause a problem, potentially? Okay. Mr. Poole, do you wish to make that motion?
I move that we table this.
Second.
Then a motion, second. Discussion? I'm sorry. There's no discussion. Mr. Presser, would you poll the commissioners, please?
Ms. Lloyd?
Yes.
Mr. Poole?
Yes.
Mr. Waddington? Mr. Murray?
Yes.
Mr. Lockhart?
Yes.
Mr. Brady?
Yes.
Ms. Twine?
Yes.
That resolution is tabled. Mr. Lockhart.
To add to that, though, perhaps the staff could come up with some possible uses, alternative to what we're doing, as a suggestion to the commission. I don't think.
Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Waddington.
Great idea. How about a small bird watch area? Put a couple benches there till we decide what to do with it in the future. If you got a lot of, I'm just throwing that out, just something to make a small park there.
It'll be for the law director to look at the specific terms of the easement to see if that will qualify.
A little park would be nice.
Little park.
Okay. That piece of legislation is tabled. Item number 10, please.
Item 10 is a resolution declaring the necessity for the city to proceed with the proposed Big Island Waterworks 42-inch valve evaluation and maintenance project, approving the specifications and engineer's estimate of cost thereof, and directing the city manager to advertise for and receive bids in relation thereto, declaring that this resolution shall take immediate effect in accordance with Section 14 of the city charter.
Commissioners, having heard this communication, how do you wish to proceed?
Mr. Chairman,
Ms. Lloyd?
I move for the adoption of this resolution under the suspension of the rules and in full accordance with Section 14 of the city charter.
Second.
Been a motion and second. Discussion. Again, Mr. Klein, we'll turn to you. That's one expensive valve. Maybe you could explain the history that you've laid out in the communication for the public, please.
Yes, sir, Mr. President, this at the water treatment plant, the Big Island Waterworks, we have a lot of redundancy through the plant. This valve is on one of the bypass lines, which allows us to do maintenance and also allows us to flow at full capacity when we are under maintenance conditions. Unfortunately, we think that the valve stem has actually sheared off and we can't actually operate the valve in its current capacity. In the position of the valve, we feel that we're not going to be able to operate under full capacity if we have to use that bypass. So what this project would be to actually install an 84-inch casing pipe to go down 16 to 18 feet to do some investigation. This valve is located right after our initial bar screen, and it feeds the remainder of the plant. So it's in a very key and critical location within the plant as well. So there's a lot of safety that needs to happen, and that's why this is such an expensive valve. Now, that being said, the majority of this is to install that 84-inch casing pipe to go down to do the investigation and hopefully do some work on that. Once we get down there and can actually look at, or once the contractor gets down there and actually looks at exactly what's wrong, then we'll be able to come up with a plan for replacement and repair of whatever the issue is.
The legislation that you've set forth recommended is for investigation or investigation and replacement?
Investigation and improvements associated with that.
Thank you. Additional questions or comments, Commissioners? Crafter, would you poll the Commissioners on the motion, please?
Ms. Lloyd?
Yes.
Mr. Poole?
Yes.
Mr. Waddington?
Yes.
Mr. Murray?
Yes.
Mr. Lockhart?
Yes.
Mr. Brady?
Yes.
Ms. Twine?
Yes.
And now on the resolution?
Ms. Lloyd?
Yes.
Mr. Poole?
Yes.
Mr. Waddington?
Yes.
Mr. Murray?
Yes.
Mr. Lockhart?
Yes.
Mr. Brady?
Yes.
Ms. Twine?
Yes.
That resolution is adopted. Item number 11, please.
Yes, item 11 is an ordinance authorizing and directing the city manager to enter into an amendment to the agreement between the City of Sandusky and FSI Disposal, Fulton Son Incorporated, with successor in interest Republic Services of Sandusky, Ohio, for services to transport collected recyclable material from city-owned drop-off collection sites, authorizing and directing the city manager and/or finance director to make a one-time lump sum payment to Republic Services in the amount of $30,000, and declaring that this ordinance shall take immediate effect in accordance with Section 14 of the city charter.
Commissioners, having heard this communication, how do you wish to proceed?
Mr. Chairman,
Mr. Brady.
move for the adoption of this ordinance under suspension of the rules in accordance with Section 14 of the city charter.
Second.
Been a motion and second. Discussion.
Mr. Chairman,
Mr. Poole.
I would just like to see going forward that we find some way to better supervise the activities at the locations for recycling.
Well, there's some background on this, Mr. Brady, Mr. Waddington, Mr. Klein. Who would like to kind of share some of the discussions that occurred with the county and where we are here?
I know, Mr. Chairman,
Mr. Brady.
I know that part of that discussion is represented in Mr. Webster's city manager report, but to share with you the background that I'm aware of and involved in, and Mr. Webster, correct me if I get out of my lane here, that this was the result of a negotiation with the successor company, Republic Steel, the successor of Fulton Sons, to a recycling arrangement that we had with Fultz. They exercised an option to get out of the recycling business and to cancel our contract with proper notice. And we, through Mr. Haberger, we investigated if they were on solid legal ground. Our law department believes that they are on solid legal ground to cancel that contract. We sat down with Republic and negotiated from, I believe it was about $7,800 a month is what it would have cost our residents to maintain the two location recycling bins that we've enjoyed now for the past 3 or 4 years. Negotiated that number down to $5,000 a month, or the fee of $30,000. And in that negotiations, we relieved Republic of a $10,000 payment to us for the bins that are sitting on both those sites. Purpose for negotiating that was obviously to get a number down that we could live with and would allow us enough time to pursue whatever option this commission chooses to go forward and hopefully keep us in the recycling business. In addition to that, it is well known, or it was made known to us by Republic, that they really have very little use for those bins. And if we stay in the recycling business in one location or current 2 locations, we would have a great use for those bins. So I think they're of value to us. I think that negotiations was certainly fruitful at the time, as I do now, and I'm optimistic that before April of 2019, staff will be able to put before this commission some type of a resolution that will keep us in the recycling business. I believe that, at least I believe that that is amenity that our citizens truly enjoy and deserve.
Anything else to add to that? Mr. Poole, you want to explore a little bit what your thoughts were?
Yeah, I should have been more clear. I'm interested in what we're going to do to ensure that the sites are managed in a fashion that they don't turn out to be trash dump sites as they have been. That's all. And as we move forward, whether it's cameras or whatever can come up with, we need to collect, encourage, and insist that the public learn to recycle properly so that it grows across the community, and also protects our interests so that we're not just hauling trash, which is really a large, significant portion of the problem now. They have nothing to do. If you give, as has been spoken before, if the bins are filled with trash, they can't recycle it, so they just go to the dump. So that's all.
Mr. Chairman, in my travels to Overland, and that was just one, and I've been reading a lot or doing a lot of research online. As Mr. Brady said earlier, all the options are on the table, but I think we need to look at possibly having these manned at some point and maybe cut the hours back instead of having them 24/7. As Mr. Pooh said, I've been down there early in the morning and find TVs and tires and stuff that's getting dropped off. Maybe a better way would be shorten the hours, 4, 5, 6 hours a day, 3, 4 days a week, and that's something that went through sites.
Yeah, I agree with Mr. Poole. I think that, you know, to a certain extent, we are paying for taxpayer subsidized trash service. And, you know, that is an individual property owner's responsibility. And I've seen what's in them, and I would sort of like to know, not sort of, I would like to know if we have that information available at some point in time, how much of the material is actually getting recycled and how much is just being landfilled. I think that would be important for all of us to know going forward in terms of whether we do something along the lines of what Oberlin does, limited hours, and a facility that has someone there who can check, you know, our residents and make sure that it's only recyclables. But I think that would be helpful for us to know, Mr. Klein, if that's something we can know.
Sure. The other thing is we're wide open. I've been down there. I get down that way a lot with my dog walking around. And you have people from Milan, Perkins, Gaston. Nothing against our neighbors, but that's for the city of Sandusky recycling. I think that's a lot of the problem too. The educational portion of this, maybe I don't think signage should do it. They're going to bring it down. They're going to drop it off. So we need to have some way to check that. You know, check this for that.
I think Officer DeSale went after, was another one of the officers, I've forgotten now, went after quite a few of those folks. We ticketed them for, I don't know if it was for disposing of trash or if it was being from outside of the area. Chief, can you remind us?
We haven't cited anyone for being outside the area. It's mostly for dumping illegal stuff like couches or TVs, that type of thing. I know the last time I checked, it's probably been 6 months or more ago. He had cited at least 40 people for that. So one of the other concerns, I guess, just to throw out there is that there's businesses that we've found that are bringing their recycles to there, and it's mostly, or it's supposed to be a residential setting, so we have that issue as well.
Okay, thanks, Chief. All things to
Chairman,
address, Mr. Poole.
question, to deal with businesses, do we have a ordinance that covers that, or is it just?
I don't know.
Is there an ordinance that you can cite for a business doing that?
We'll have to look. I think it was posted that it's residential.
Well, there's, yeah, the difference between posted as opposed to actual enforcement power, that you can fine them. Just if you would check, if not, perhaps we need to do that. And also, if we could get a report on, if we've written 40 or whatever the number of citations, could you follow up on what the end result was? What was the disposition? How'd that turn out?
Yeah, he keeps track of them, so I'll
Yeah,
get
the
that to you.
disposition goes through the courts and whatever.
It's useful to know as well.
Yeah.
Okay.
It's a total system.
Mr. Grady.
An additional component to negotiating this number down to the $30,000 was that Mr. Klein and myself appeared before the Solid Waste Policy Committee shortly after that negotiation was concluded, and made a presentation and a request of that policy committee to help us with the funding of that $30,000. And since then, they have agreed to fund the entire $30,000. So in essence, we are getting what I'll call a free ride between now and April, and that is directly related to the lobbying effort of County Commissioner Matt Old. Gave us the great assistance on getting that money from them.
So we are, of course, part of Erie County, something that we sometimes have to remind the county commissioners of occasionally, but so that's good that we should receive that funding.
Agreed.
Additional questions or comments? Mr. Cresser, would you poll the commissioners on the motion, please?
Ms. Lloyd? Yes. Mr. Poole?
Yes.
Mr. Waddington?
Yes.
Mr. Murray?
Yes.
Mr. Lockhart?
Yes.
Mr. Brady?
Yes.
Ms.
And-
Twine?
Yes.
And now on the ordinance?
Ms. Lloyd? Yes. Mr. Poole?
Yes.
Mr. Waddington? Mr. Murray?
Yes.
Mr. Lockhart?
Yes.
Mr. Brady? Ms. Twine?
Yes.
That ordinance is adopted. And that is our final item of business. Before I forget, I'll turn it over to Mr. Wobser. I do want to remind everyone here and those at home that looking around the table here and prompted to think of the fact that we have the Beard Centennial before our next meeting at 4 o'clock next Friday, the day after Thanksgiving. I don't know where that's going to be. Where's the Beard Centennial?
State Theater.
At the State Theater, okay. And it looks like we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 participants.
We're just November guys.
Oh, you're just November guys.
Forgot about Commissioner Brady. Commissioner Brady's there.
Yeah.
Trying.
Ready?
4 hours. This is 4 hours of growth.
Well, good luck to all of the candidates. And there is also there's a whole afternoon of events. It starts with a holiday bazaar and brew. I'm not pronouncing that right. I'm sure Mackenzie would be after me for that. And then the Beard Centennial at 4, and of course the traditional holiday lighting ceremony at 6. So we're looking forward to all of that. So good luck, participants. Mr. Wobser.
Thank you, commissioners, audience, and staff. I will start with the donations. First, a donation of a 44 by 48 Snoopy holiday display for display in Washington Park was received by an anonymous donor with an approximate value of $400. I'd ask for a motion to accept that donation.
So, second.
It's been a motion and second discussion. Without objection, the motion will be approved. And hearing no objection, the motion is approved with our thanks.
Thank you. A donation of $300 of Kroger gift cards was received to purchase turkeys to distribute for Thanksgiving, also from an anonymous donor. I'd ask for a motion for that donation.
So moved.
Good motion and second discussion. Without objection, the motion be approved. And hearing no objection, the motion is approved.
$1,000 donation to the K-9 Fund for the Remember Cruise, from the Remember Cruise and Car Club and sponsor Smith's Top Notch. I'd ask for a motion to accept that donation.
So moved.
There's been a motion. Is there a second? Second. Been a motion and second. Discussion? Without objection, the motion will be approved, and hearing no objection, the motion approved.
A $100 donation from the Home Savings Bank for the Coat for Kids program. I'd ask for a motion to accept that donation.
So moved.
Been a motion. Is there a second?
Second.
Been a motion and second. Discussion? Without objection, the motion be approved, and hearing no objection, the motion is approved. Again, with our thanks.
Great. $1,000 donation to the Shoe Fund, also from the Remember Cruise and Car Club. I'd ask for a motion to receive that donation.
So moved.
Second.
Been a motion and second. Discussion? Objection, the motion be approved, and hearing no objection, the motion is approved. And with all that generosity, it reminds us Christmas is around the corner. Mr. Waddington, I'm sure you'll be hosting again the carriage share, so let us know when. Okay.
A special thank you to Wendy Allen for a donation of $5,000 towards the planting of trees throughout the city. A former resident of Sandusky, she was motivated by climate change and inspired by the Sandusky Register's cover of the recent Great Lakes Restoration Initiative grant awarded to the city for the installation of approximately 270 trees next year. Due to her generous gift, an additional 15 trees will be planted throughout city neighborhoods this spring. I'd ask for a motion to accept that donation.
So moved.
Been a motion and second. Discussion. I just think it's a great example of how the good work that so many people in our community are doing around the table, and obviously far, far deep into the community, is resonating in very positive ways, and to cause someone to be motivated to make that kind of generous donation that just further enhances what's going on is just really an outstanding example of civic contribution. So unless there's objection, the motion will be approved, again with our thanks.
Thank you. Thank you to Construction Equipment and Supply for donating the use of a lift for 4 weeks worth $1,500 in kind to the Division of Facilities and Property for the purpose of decorating the city for the holiday season. I'd ask for a motion to accept that donation.
So moved.
Second.
Been a motion and second. Discussion. Without objection, the motion be approved. And hearing no objection, the motion is approved with our thanks.
Also, a memorial bench honoring Robert S. Guss Sr. was purchased by Betty Jean Guss in the amount of $1,710. The bench will be placed in Washington Park facing the gazebo. I'd ask for a motion to accept that donation.
So moved.
Second.
Been a motion and second. Discussion. Without objection, the motion will be approved. And hearing no objection, the motion is approved.
Great. And finally, just reiterating, Commissioner Brady brought this up during the business related to recycling centers, but Commissioner Maddold helped the city to secure a $30,000 grant from the Erie County Solid Waste District. That'll be formalized at a meeting next week and will help to cover the costs needed to maintain the 2 bulk recycling locations through April as per the agreement with Republic Services. This will be finalized at the next Erie County Solid Waste District meeting. I don't believe we need a motion for that tonight, but probably when we formalize the agreement, we'll bring that.
Okay. All right.
So,
I think we're supposed to.
Moving on to new and old business, starting with administration. The Christmas tree lighting ceremony will take place Wednesday, November 21st at 7 p.m. in Shade Mylander Plaza. The holiday Bazaar and Brew will be held on Friday, November 23rd from 2 to 5 p.m. in Shade Mylander Plaza. I think we have over 30 vendors now signed up, and that'll take place in downtown Sandusky. The Beard Centennial Contest will take place at 4 p.m. on Friday, November 23rd at the Sandusky State Theater. The holiday lighting ceremony will be held on Friday, November 23rd at 6 p.m. in Washington Park, with Polar Express being shown at the Sandusky State Theater at 7 p.m. Following that. So we've got a lot going on that weekend. Also, the Sandusky Municipal Court is seeking permission to apply to the Supreme Court of Ohio Technology Grant in the amount of $45,046.05. If awarded, the grant would cover the upgrade installation of current software and hardware. Any amount of the $45,046.05 that would not be awarded would be paid through the Sandusky Municipal Court's Computer Improvement Fund. It's requested that the Commission, by motion, authorize this grant application, and so, if awarded, the monies may be received and dispersed at the appropriate time. I'd ask for that motion.
So moved.
Second.
There's been a motion and second. Discussion. Mrs. Kresser, we can do this with a voice vote? Mr. Haber, thank you. All in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carries.
Great. Moving on to the police department. The police department is participating in No Shave November, as modeled by Chief Orzak this evening. Also, the department participated in many trick-or-treat events and passed out candy. Thank you for the generous donations of candy that we received from the community. And then finally, the Lexipol policy and procedure project is beginning to wrap up. The policy manual has been updated for every facet of the department. Officers began reviewing the 151 policy sections and 70-plus procedural sections of the manual on November 6th. We hope to have the officers read and acknowledge the manual sections by January of next year for full implementation. A special thanks to Acting Law Director Trevor Hayberger, Lieutenant Scott Dahlgren, and Lieutenant Danny Lewis for the countless days and hours of review of the manual over the last 8 months. Moving on to the fire department, the Sandusky Fire Department participated in various community activities, including trick-or-treat at Cedar Point in downtown Sandusky, Sandusky City Schools Employee Health Fair, and they continue to hold tours and safety talks for children from preschool on up. Also, the fire department, along with Chief Wilcox, are participating in No Shave November, also being modeled tonight by our chief to raise awareness for men's health. The Sandusky Fire Department is participating in the reading program, Read with a Firefighter with Sandusky Schools, where a firefighter will go to the school and read a book to the kids. For Public Works, the city will be awarded a $493,946 grant for the 2018 Ohio Department of Natural Resources Clean Ohio Trails Fund program for the first phase of Landing Park. That's obviously very exciting. The 2018 leaf collection program is off to a great start and currently on schedule. Any changes due to inclement weather will be shared via press release in the city website. We would like to welcome Keyshawn Gray, who joined the Division of Streets and Traffic as a full-time maintenance 2. Co-workers were impressed with Keyshawn while he worked as a seasonal employee over the summer and wanted to make sure he didn't get away. Also, community development, citywide residential tax abatement. The city has finalized program guidelines and applications for the newly expanded community reinvestment area residential tax abatement program. We want to thank the Sandusky City Commission and the Sandusky City Schools for their support and approval of this newly expanded residential construction incentive. Additionally, we want to thank Erie County and more specifically the Auditor's Office for their input and assistance in developing the guidelines and application. All residents, property owners, or developers with questions about the program can reach out to Debbie Eversall, our Housing Program Development Specialist, at 419-627-5832 or via email at deversole, that's DEVERSOLE, at ci.sandusky.oh.us. Guidelines and applications are also in the process of being uploaded to the city website. Also, the Community Development Department is currently accepting proposals with cost for consulting services for the preparation of the U.S. Department of Housing and Urban Development Consolidated Plan, 2019 one-year action plan and update to the analysis of impediments to fair housing. It's a mouthful. Proposals will be accepted until 5 p.m. on November 16th in the Community Development Office at 222 Meg Street, Sandusky, Ohio, 44870. And should be mailed to the attention of Ariel Blanca, Community Development Manager. Moving on to the Planning Department, the regular Planning Commission meeting is scheduled Wednesday, November 28th at 4:30 p.m. in the Commission chambers. The regular Board of Zoning Appeals meeting is scheduled for November 15th at 4:30 p.m. also in the Commission chambers. A Landmark Commission meeting is scheduled for Wednesday, November 28th at 3:30 p.m. in the Commission chambers. And a Public Arts and Culture Commission meeting is scheduled for Thursday, November 15th at 5:30 p.m. also in the Commission chambers. And for recreation, just a reminder that the second annual Dot the I, Block the M race will take place on Saturday, November 24th, starting at 8:30 a.m. in Central Park. You can sign up in our recreation office, and people are looking forward to the game and to the race this year. So with that, I conclude my remarks for this evening. I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Mr. Webster. Commissioners, questions or comments from the city manager? Mr. Waddington.
What's the online water bill that can be up and running?
Through the commission president to Commissioner Waddington, I know we've had a glitch in that I've talked to both Hank and Stewart about. It's in the process of being worked on now. I don't know if either of you want to provide an update.
Hopefully tomorrow. We were down to one person in our office today, so we really hadn't had a chance to deal with it today, but we're hoping tomorrow that it'll be back up and functioning, so.
No additional questions or comments? Mr. Wilshire, I don't had that you previously announced the receipt of that huge grant. We just kind of slipped right past that.
Through the commission president to the commissioners in the audience, it sort of slipped right past us. I still don't know that we have been formally notified. I think we finally did, but we got a call Casey Sparks, actually, in community development, got a call from a former colleague in the Cincinnati area saying congrats on the $500,000 grant, to which she thought he was referring to the Whiteman Weber grant. Was surprised because that wasn't public yet either. And he said, no, you're on the grant. And so we knew that we had applied for it at a commission meeting several months ago. Aaron, I think, was out at a conference or something, and so we were unaware that we had gotten it until we got that call, which we weren't sure was for sure. And then Tom Jackson somehow got a hold of it at the paper and had an article in last weekend's paper. He scooped Andy on that one. And so, he didn't like that, but I'll pay for that one later. But so we were all caught off guard by it. It was well covered and well received on social media and online. But I do agree it is a monumental grant that brings close to $1 million, the amount that we've raised from outside the city coffers for the both for two different sections of the pathway. And I do think at an appropriate time we should recognize it more generally. But I think everybody was caught off guard. I scrambled to email the commission when I found out about it last weekend. But it was good news to get suddenly, unlike most of the news you get suddenly. But we do apologize that we weren't able to make a bigger deal of it. But we are very excited, and that will, if you remember, that match that came for that grant is the access road that Cedar Fair is building for that project we used for match. So this will cover the pathway portion of the trail for the entire access drive, not only to the indoor portion of the facility, but all the way out to the point where the road will go, to the point the pathway portion will be able to be constructed.
Outstanding. Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
Additional questions or comments for the city manager?
Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Brady.
I'd like to acknowledge a great start to the streets department on the leaf pickup. To be noted, both Mayor Murray and myself's leaves were picked up early this morning. So the priority is correct.
Additional questions or comments, perhaps more germane comments? You're welcome to. If not, then we will turn to old business. I can't be too hard on you because I need to ride home tonight.
Yeah, that's right.
Any items of old business? Any items of new business?
Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Waddington.
I'd like to make a motion that the commission accept the 2019 calendar for our new meeting schedule next year.
Second.
There's been a motion and a second. There is a list of meeting dates that Mr. Kresser distributed just before our meeting started. It's good that we should adopt the motion, but the meeting dates are set by the charter in terms of being the second and fourth Monday. You're shaking your head no? No. I think it's set by charter.
They're also covered in the rules of order.
Okay, all right. And then that's when we move them to the holidays, I think. Okay. Discussion? If not, then all in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. The dates are set. Thank you, Mrs. Kresser. I meant to bring up under old business, but I'm going to do it now. There have been some regarding the placement of the time capsule, and I think Mr. Lasko, you had sent out an email. Somebody sent out an email, maybe it was you, Mrs. Kresser, sometime over the course of the last 3 weeks with potential locations, with the thought that we might have a discussion tonight about what's preferred. I don't know that we need to make a decision tonight, but maybe we could have some discussion on the locations that the commission prefers. For my part, I thought inside the commission chambers made sense.
Mr. Chairman,
Ms. Bull?
I agree with that.
Any different feelings?
Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Water?
Inside the chambers, also does, like we have the boy and boot out here in the hall, having something like that, plexiglass, doesn't have to be $10,000. Put everything in some way to lock it, like we've done out here. Keep it simple, where you can, someplace where you got access, you can at least look at it. Maybe I hope they're gathering stuff, by the way. Pictures and different things.
We've started to look at some collections for that already.
By the way, where does the boy with the boot go? Does he go in the lobby? Anybody know? In the new lobby?
You can put him there.
Certainly could.
Yeah.
He can move
We'll
them.
we'll have some more discussion.
I apologize. I suggest that we move the vending machines and we'll put the board with the booth there. I should speak
Through the
quietly.
commission president, we've actually been quite active in the vending machine conversations, and I think the staff recommendation is actually to eliminate the vending machines in part because we want to encourage staff. Part of being downtown is not to put $2 into a machine for a candy bar, but to walk around and patronize businesses, which they'll have a lot at their fingertips now. So I don't think you'll see vending machines in the new City Hall lobby.
Here, here.
So grab your stuff, grab your snacks before the commission meetings when you come in. But I think it'll encourage foot traffic, so.
Well, we might vote the boy with the boot on as an 8th member of the commission. So, that might be okay too. Well, I hope we find a space for him in the lobby. Any other items of new or old business?
Mr. Chairman.
Ms. Twine.
There is a vacancy on the Community Relations Commission. Dominic Wells relocated out of state. So I'd like to appoint Dr. Valerie Cruz to fill out the remainder of his term, which ends December 31st, 2021.
There's been a motion. Is there a second? Motion second. Discussion? Voice vote? All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Motion carries and the appointment is approved. Thank you. Additional items of new business by anyone other than Commissioner Brady.
Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Brady.
I'm about to ruin your evening.
You don't listen very well.
No.
Okay.
I should like to make a motion for an executive session regarding eminent litigation.
Second.
And a motion second. Discussion? Mr. Crusher, would you poll the commissioners on the motion, please?
Ms. Lloyd?
Yes.
Mr. Poole?
Okay.
Mr. Waddington? Mr. Murray?
Yes.
Mr. Lockhart?
Here.
Mr. Brady?
Yes.
Ms. Twine?
Yes.
That executive session is set.
Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Brady.
I'd like to make an additional motion for an executive session regarding collective bargaining.
And motion second. Discussion. Mr. Crusher, would you poll the commissioners on the motion, please?
Ms. Lloyd?
Yes.
Mr. Poole?
Yes.
Mr. Waddington?
Yes.
Mr. Murray?
Yes.
Mr. Lockhart?
Yes.
Mr. Brady?
Yes.
Ms. Twine?
Yes.
That executive session is set. Any other items of new business? Then we will turn to audience participation. Anyone wishing to address the commission on any city-related items, please step to the microphone, give us your name and address.
Tim Schwanger, 362 Sheffield Way. Just want to go back on the consent agenda, item J, which is the increase in the contract for stump removal. I'm seeing a lot of in the boulevard stumps, large trees that have actually been in the boulevard for a number of years. And I'm just wondering if the city has a system by which they go through the different neighborhoods, maybe our nuisance abatement people or whatever, even maybe the police department during daylight hours can document some of these stumps that have been sitting there for several years, if there's a plan to also get rid of those as part of this project or maybe a future project. The other comment I wanted to make is on the executive session for tonight for the bargaining committee or bargaining at the bargaining table for safety services. You know, every time we spend money like we did tonight from the EMS funds to help purchase a piece of property that's not condemned, it's not in our land bank program, and it's a functional property, this commission is giving the bargaining committee from the unions just that much more energy and willpower to try to get additional manpower on their staff. I mean, you're just kind of like playing into their hands. And I'm a union member through and through. I was a UAW member for 35 years, and I support their efforts in trying to get more staff on both police and fire. I mean, that's something that this community was promised through issue 8. And there's been a couple of additions here and there, okay? But from what I understand from the fire department, we're still a number of firefighters short from the big layoffs back in 2008, 2009, 2011. I mean, I've done some research on this. There's been articles actually in firefighter magazines and websites about the big reduction, the big layoffs back in 2009 through 2011. And it's been 4 years since issue 8. And we're still not where we should be on both police and fire. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Schwager. Additional, anyone else wishing to address the commission? I do disagree. The Issue 8 was designed to stabilize the safety forces. There were no promises made that I recall, certainly, that there would be increase in staffing, but that we would be able to maintain the existing level that we had. Yes, sir.
Good evening. My name is James Snyder. I'm the president of Sandusky Firefighters, Local 327. Thank you, Tim, for speaking up for us. He's 100% right. But I didn't come to talk about that. We do need to have a serious discussion about our EMS fund and how it's spent. So I'll be coming back to you guys maybe the next meeting or two so we can have that discussion about how our EMS billing is spent. I would like to talk tonight. The city manager accepted a donation for $1,000 for the Sandusky Firefighter Shoe Fund. Many moons ago, the firefighters started the shoe fund to help out individuals in need that needed shoes. It is currently run by Captain D'Amico. Captain D'Amico states there is plenty of money for people that are in need of shoes. When we have structure fires, which we have several this year, Captain D'Amico has reached out to the individuals that were affected and was able to provide shoes for some of these people. Some of the people didn't get back with them. So if anybody in the area, it doesn't have to be Sandusky, it could be Erie County. If you know of anybody that's in need of shoes, please contact Fire Station 1, 419-627-5822. And our administrative assistant, Diane Malvin, she'll take the message and she'll get that information to Captain D'Amico so we can get the individuals some well-needed shoes for them. So thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Snyder. We do appreciate what the firefighters do every day, and particularly with the shoe donation. I will caution you, though, that when it comes to negotiations between the city and the firefighters, there are very specific pathways that we all must go through. So I'm not going to comment on the balance of what you said, and would urge you to be extra cautious in that regard, because we want to all stay on the straight and narrow. We want to have a good agreement, want to have good relations, and those pathways are the best way to accomplish just that. Thank you. Anyone else? If not, then we will take a 3-minute recess, no more, and come back for executive sessions.